In this video, we are going to cover the Vedic culture, which was prevalent from 1500 BC to 600 BC. So from 1500 BC to 1000 BC, it was the early Vedic period, and 1000 to 600 BC, it was the later Vedic period. Now, let's move to some background. End of the Harappan civilization took place, and there was the advent of Aryans. Now the Harappan culture by this 1500 BC declined, and the Indo-Aryans, they came to the northwestern India, or they entered the northwestern India by this 1500, or by the starting of this 1500 BC, and they came from the Indo-Iranian region. Means these two events occurred simultaneously: the decline of the Harappan culture and the advent of the Aryans. The initial settlement of these Aryan was in the northwestern side, and then plains of the Punjab, but later they moved to the Indo-Gangetic plains. We can see that Aryans moved from the northwestern part to the eastern part of the Indian subcontinent. They were basically cattle keeping people, or a cattle rearing people. They were pastoralist, and they came to Indian subcontinent in the search of the pastures. Means they were moving from the west to the east in search of the pastures. By the 600 BC or 6th century BC, they had occupied North India, which is referred to as Aryavarta. Now, one fact: Soma is a famous plant which is used by the Vedic priests to make the juice for the fire sacrifice. And the ninth mandal of the Rig Veda is dedicated to this Soma plant, or in the praise of the Soma plant. So it is the ninth mandal which is dedicated to the Soma plant, ninth mandal of the Rig Veda. And the priest used to make juice of this Som plant for the fire sacrifice. Now, next, original home of the Aryans. There are different views regarding the home of the Aryans, like Arctic region, Germany, Central Asia, southern Russia. Bal Gangadhar Tilak argues that the Aryans came from the Arctic region on the basis of the astronomical calculation, but it is the theory of southern Russia which is most widely accepted and most probable. They Aryans, they entered India by 15 or in the 1500 BC. They spoke the Indo-Aryan language, or the Sanskrit language. And Vedic. Now let's move to the Vedic literature. There are four Vedas: Rig Ved, Yajur Ved, Sam Ved, and Artha Ved. The compilation of the not compilation, the Rig Ved was basically composed in the early Rig Vedic period, and the other three Vedas, Yajur Ved, Sam Ved, Artha Ved, these were composed in the later Vedic period. Now we'll see about some the content about this Rig Ved. Now this Rig Veda is the oldest Veda. It was composed 3500 years ago. There are approximately 1028 hymns known as suktas, or well said. These hymns were sung in the praise of various gods as well as goddesses. And these hymns were composed by the sages, or the rishis. Next, there were three gods which were most important in the Rigvedic period, that is Indra, warrior god Agni; Som, the plant from which special drink is prepared. These hymns were taught by the priest to the students, and they were basically taught, it was the oral transfer. They were taught to recite, to memorize each syllable, word, and sentence bit by bit with a great care, with such great care that they avoid any kind, even a minute mistake. So the priest, they used to taught their students orally to recite and memorize. Most of the hymns, they were composed by men, few by women. So women also participated in the composition of the hymns, but most of the hymns, they were composed by the men, few were composed by the women. It was written several centuries after it was composed. So it was composed during the Rig Vedic period and a later Vedic period, but it was written many years later. Okay. Some of the hymns in the Rig Veda are in the form of dialogues. So hymns some of the hymns were in the form of the dialogues, like dialogue between a sage Vishwamitra and the two rivers Byas and Satluj. Okay, one thing I missed. Hmm. The priest of the Rigved is Hotra. Next, Yajurved. The priest of the Yajurved is Advaryu. And what is there in a Yajurved? Details of the rules to be observed at the time of sacrifice, like while making sacrifice, what are the various rules and regulations which need to be followed. Next, Samved. Samved, the priest of the Samved, Udgatri. And this Samved basically known as Book of Chants. This Samved set to tune for the purpose of chanting during the sacrifice, and origin of the Indian music is traced to it. Origin of the Indian music is traced to the Samved. Arthaved, wait a minute. Okay. Arthaved basically it's the details of rituals, and it's basically a book of spells and incarnation, and it has got various magic spells, various various mantras etc for the cure of the various diseases. Now, some sacred books. Brahmanas, it's a treaty related to prayer and sacrificial ceremony. Upanishads, philosophical text on various topics like soul, the absolute, the origin of the world, the mysteries of the nature. Aranyakas basically these are forest books which deal with the mysticism, rites, rituals, and sacrifice. Ramayana by Valmiki, Mahabharata by Vedvyas. There are in total 18 Puranas, out of which Matsya Puran is the oldest one. Now, Rig Vedic period or the early Vedic period, we are going to see various features of this period, their economic style, and the various the political organization, etc. Okay, so this Rig Vedic period or the early Vedic period, it went from 1500 BC to 1000 BC. Aryans during this early Vedic period they were confined to the Indus region, and they call this Indus region as Sapta Sindhu, the land of seven rivers. Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Byas, Satluj, plus Indus and Saraswati. Now, if we talk about political organization, the polity of the early Rigvedic period was monarchical in nature, but the succession was and the succession was hereditary. So, polity was monarchical and the succession was hereditary. Basic unit of this political organization was kul or a family. The basic unit means the bottom, or we can say the base of any political or of any political organization was the family or a kul. Several families means if we club these families together, then it will form a village. And the leader of that village was basically known as Gramani. If we group these villages, then it becomes a Vishu. The head of this Vishu was known as Vishyapati, or it was headed by Vishyapati. The highest political unit was known as Jana or the tribe. There were several tribal kingdoms during this Rigvedic period: Bharatas, Matsyas, Yadus, and Purus. And the head of the kingdom was known as Rajan or a king, Gopajanasya or Janasya Gopa. King was assisted by two people, Purohit or a priest, and Senani or a commander of the army. There were two popular bodies, Sabha, Samiti, and one more, Vidhat. Sabha was council of elders, Samiti general assembly of the people, Vidhat it was the committee to distribute plunder of war. Now, if we talk about after discussing the political organization where we had seen that the basic unit was family, clubbing together the family, we get a village where the leader was known as at that time Gramani. Then group of villages become this Vishu, and then the head of which is headed by Vishyapati, or which was at that time headed by Vishyapati. The highest political unit was called as Jana. Next, we have the social life. Social life, may we see there was the prevalent of egalitarian society, equality, whether it is gender equality or whether it is social equality, and the interchange of the varna was allowed. Society was patriarchal, but there was some incidents of the general equality. Basic unit of the society, that is family, which was headed by the grahapati. Monogamy was generally practiced, but in some noble families or the royal families, polygamy was also practiced. Women were given equal opportunities. So, women they were given equal opportunities as men for their spiritual as well as intellectual development. Women could attend the popular assemblies of Sabha and Samiti. There was no prevalence of child marriage in the early Vedic period. No practice of sati was there. No parda system was there in the early Vedic period. Both men and women, they wore two garments, upper and the lower garments, made up of cotton as well as wool. They also wore ornaments. Now we can see here agriculture was there. Wheat, barley, it was cultivated. These wheat and barley were cultivated at that time. Milk and its products were also used. Now, some pastimes were there at that time: chariot racing, horse racing, dicing, and music. These were the pastimes. Social division was not rigid because this uh, allowed, so social division was not rigid. If we see the economic condition, they were basically pastoral people, means they were charwahe bolte hain इन्हें, pastoral people. Their occupation was cattle rearing, carpentry, spinning of the cotton and the woolen fabrics. They began practicing agriculture after this pastoralism, means initially they were pastoralist, later they get transformed into the agriculturalist. Then there were carpenters who produced the chariots and the plow. Workers were there in the metal, made various kind of articles with various metals, etc. Goldsmiths produced ornaments. Potters produced the vessels for the domestic use. Trade was there, and the medium for the trade was river. So rivers, they were used as a means of transport, and nowadays we are also using the rivers for the interstate trade, like that is waterways. And at that time the gold coins known as nishka were used as a medium. These gold coins were used as a medium of exchange in the large transactions. If we talk about the religion, they basically worshipped the nature, and there were no temples, there were no idol worship. There were approximately more than, means there were more than 33 deities with no order and no importance, which were worshipped. Prithvi, Agni, Vayu, Varuna, Indra, these were the gods. Indra was the most popular god, and Varuna was known as the upholder of the natural order. Next to the Indra, Agni was very much important because it acted as an intermediary between the gods and the people. Prayers were offered to the gods in expectation of certain kind of rewards. And what kind of rewards? They only wanted ghee, milk, grains, offerings, and sometimes cow also. Indra, now, okay, we'll see how many suktas were dedicated for which god. Approximately 250 suktas were dedicated for the Indra, 200 suktas for Agni, and 33 suktas for Varun. Now, this Gayatri mantra to invoke the sun god was composed by Vishwamitra during this early Vedic period. And the people of this early Vedic period, they demanded basically material gain. Now, the later Vedic period. Later Vedic period went from 1000 BC to 600 BC. 600 BC is the time when there was the formation of the this Mahajanpadas. Now, the Satpata Brahmana, it tells us, or it refers to the expansion of the Aryans to the eastern Gangetic plains. Means this Satpata Brahmana basically tells us that Aryans has expanded to the eastern Gangetic plains from the west, from the Indus region. In the later Vedic period, they have moved to the Gangetic plains. There was the growth of large kingdoms. Now, as they have moved to the Gangetic plains, they had discovered iron on the way, and they started making plow using that iron. Because of that, they become agriculturalist, and the agriculture was advanced. They started making weapons and the tools made up of iron. And because of that, later by the end of the 1600 BC, there was the formation of the various Mahajanpadas. Because of this, growth of large kingdom took place. Kuru and Panchal, they were flourished in the initial in the beginning. After the fall of this Kuru Panchal, there was the emergence of Koshila, Kasi, Vidisha. Then later Magdha, Anga, and Vanga, and we know Magadhan Empire. It it was the most, or is the strongest empire among all the Mahajanpadas. There were three divisions of India: Aryavarta, North India; Madhya Desha, Central India; Dakshinapatha, South India. Now, if we talk about the political organization of the later Vedic period, in we know that there were larger kingdoms. Formation of Janpad took place. Royal power increased with increase in the size of kingdom. Now the king performed various sacrifices. Rather than offering prayers to the nature, the king here started performing sacrifices. Rajasuya Yagya, Ashwamedh, and Vajpayee Yagya. basically to strengthen his position, to showcase his power, his authority. The king used to perform these rituals and sacrifices. King has assumed various titles like Raja Visvajanan, Ahila Bhuvanapati, Lord of Earth, Ikarat and Samrat. And now also the tax collection started in the later Vedic period because the king needed some money to become more strong and to strengthen his position. So tax collection started, and as the tax collection was there, new officials were required. So treasury officer was there, tax collector, royal messenger. Importance of Sabha and Samitis diminished. If we see the economic condition, iron was extensively used. Agriculture became the chief occupation, barley, rice, wheat. Also, they had the knowledge of manure. Industrial activities started. Various activities, trade was also there, both internal trade as well as foreign trade. They were familiar with the sea, they traded with the countries like Babylon, and means they were familiar with the seas. Okay, it's important. Hereditary merchant class came into existence. Vanya, this hereditary merchant class, Vanya, it came into existence during this later Vedic period. Nishka coin was also there in the early Rigvedic period, but this are the silver coins like Satmana, Krishnala. It also came into existence in this later Vedic period. They were used as a medium of exchange. So Nishka, Satmana and Krishnala, they were used as a medium of exchange. Urbanization started, which urbanization declined after this Harappan civilization, and now it started again. Coins were introduced for the first time approximately around 600 to 500 BC. So, if the question comes, the first time monetization of economy was done in 600 to 500 BC. If we talk about social life, there were four divisions of the society, and they were rigid divisions. Two higher caste enjoyed the privileges, Brahmana and Kshatriya, and they denied the few rights and etc. to the lower caste, Vaishyas and Sudras. Power of the father increased. So, as the power of the father increased, the condition of the women deteriorated. No improvement in the status of the women took place. Women, they were considered inferior to and subordinate to the men. Women earlier they used to attend the Sabha, Samiti, etc. But now they lost their political rights of attending these assemblies. Child marriage became common. We had seen that there was no child marriage, no parda system, no sati system in the Rigvedic period. But now the child marriage it became common. According to the Atre Brahmana, this is very important. Like according to the Atre Brahmana, daughter was described as a source of misery, and women in the royal households they enjoyed certain privileges. Now, this 10th mandal or the book of Rigved, Purushukta, uh, mentions about the Virat Purush. So this is the 10th mandal of the Rigved, mentions about this Virat Purush. As per this, Brahmana they originated from the mouth, so they are pure. Kshatriya from the arms, so they are strong, and Vaishyas from the thighs and Shudras from the feet. Religion. In the religion, Indra and Agni, which held the strongest or the very much important position in the early Rigvedic period, but now they had lost their importance. And the prominent gods were Prajapati, creator, Vishnu, protector, Rudra, destroyer. Importance of prayers decreased. Now sacrifices increased because the king had to strengthen its position. So sacrifices increased. Priesthood became hereditary profession. Authors of Upanishads, essence of Hindu philosophy, turned away from useless rituals, insisted on more knowledge for peace and salvation. Now, the institution of various four kinds of ashram took place during this period. Like brahmacharya up to 25 years, grihastha as you reach 26 years of age, so 26 to 50 years you have to live the life like a grihast, and 51 to 75 years you have to live a life of this semi ascetic life, that is vanaprastha, and 76 to 100 years sannyas. Now we are done with this. In the next video we'll move to the Jainism, and thank you.